Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Grande Bouffe
The Big Feas.
with myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy. As always, we are here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer each and every week. Ta-da!
That was great. You've got this. You got it down.
I know. It's a good thing. It's fun.
I feel like all of us are soon going to have to learn sort of pledges or log lines to being good citizens soon.
Okay, but see, you can't say sort of anymore if you want to do that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess we're more in Rush Limbaugh's America than Terry Gross's America.
Did you see my tweet yesterday? I said, message to millennials, cash is king.
That is so pointed to me. That is so about me. That's called subtweeting is what that is. That's harsh, buddy.
Man, I remember going to Richmond, Virginia and hanging out with this girl, and I was trying to take her to a restaurant, and there were no ATMs around, and this is back in the olden days of 1999 or something, and you know, it was rough, man. It's hard out there for a pound. If you couldn't get some cash in your pocket, boy, you going in the bulky.
I know. That's tough.
There's vagrancy laws in this here town.
Yeah, and you couldn't find any native peoples to trade beads with to buy entire
Hell no,
states.
you're in the fan district of Richmond, Virginia, buddy.
That sounds tough. I mean, the barter system, while still in effect, it was kind of transitioning out.
You know, and what do you got in your pocket?
Yeah.
Like a piece of string and 50 cents.
Just like,
why you got a piece of string in your pocket?
Just like a living dinosaur.
What is
in
that,
your
a
pocket.
paperclip?
Yeah, that's
not going to get you anywhere.
It's a relatable problem and a thing I face a lot. You know, honestly, though, in Brooklyn, where I actually don't live, I live in Queens now. Yeah, this is my first public confession. I live in Queens now, but living in Brooklyn, there is a bizarre amount of places that are cash only. Clearly, because they're evading taxes, but yeah, cash is important.
No, let me just tell you that's not the only reason. The other reason is because
lay it on me.
I'm going to tell you, there's a fee for every credit card or debit transaction. The bank takes $2 or $3 out of each one of those transactions. So if you want that money, you get it in cash. That's a big deal for any kind of establishment in New York.
Why
does
my
cash.
bodega agree to take that card where a bar where I'm clearly going to spend like $25, $30 won't do it? I don't know.
It's up to the manager, man. It's up to the owner. The owner's going to make that decision, and it's going to be what it's going to be.
Are you saying that the manager of this
the owner
of this millennial bar is a more savvy Peter Gallagher type? Where maybe the bodega...
I don't know what Peter Gallagher is.
I'm just trying to guess.
I like the entry point, believe me. Oh, Lordy. All right, so wait a minute, Mike. Before we get into Peter Gallagher, and there's much to dissect in Peter Gallagher's
mostly the
persona.
eyebrows.
Oh my God, yeah, they're hovering.
They're owned by the Disney Corporation.
They float.
I think
they're remote controlled like a drone. All right, tell us about our beer, Mike, because I already know you got a good old Victory beer. I love Victory Brewing.
Victory Brewing gave us a summer love, first of all, it's summer for us. This is I could tie this into this film if I really, really tried, but mostly it's about movies I love. It's about love I feel in the summer now.
I like it.
This beer is kind of it's a little skunky. Yeah.
It's nice. It's got some hair on it, as they say.
I totally agree with that.
I think it's the kind of beer that you want to drink with a burger or a grilled cheese sandwich.
Absolutely.
Oh man, this would go really good with a grilled cheese sandwich, a big slice of tomato and some mayonnaise and salt and pepper.
You get some cheddar in your mouth, you throw one of these down.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a real good
Or
time.
a hot dog. It's like a ball game beer.
Well, yeah, I mean it's kind of branded as such, you know.
Yeah, I know I'm being influenced by the label because there's a baseball on the label.
Yeah, totally. But there's also a fish being caught and a pretty lady posing. This is
The ABVs is low. It's a session beer, as they call it, which means that you can drink it during a recording session and not be so drunk that you mess it up.
I think that is what they mean.
That's what I live. Anytime I hear it's a session beer, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. It's time to make a recording.
My fingers and my mouth still work. I'll do it.
All right. So if you are a returning listener of Le Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast, which we hope that you are, you may remember a little episode that we did back in February with our special guest, Michael Kimmel of Songbird fame, who brought to us Kafka, which was Steven Soderbergh's second film. Now we have reverted to his first film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which, if you haven't seen it, you should be feeling a little guilty right about now, because this is a seminal film on a lot of levels. Certainly from the standpoint of seeing a director's first film, and first films, I can tell you from a critic's standpoint, I avoid them like the plague because they're always horrible. Never want to see someone's first movie.
The rule of thumb is a little different. What they say is your first film is your best film because it took 35 years to make.
Did you ever watch that Deepak Chetty movie that I sent you?
I haven't yet.
Oh, you gotta watch that.
I'll check it out. Don't embarrass me in the air like that. I didn't watch it yet.
Oh, come on. It's all right.
Yeah,
I'll
watch it.
So yeah,
I have no opinion. I haven't watched it.
I know you'll watch it.
What I was saying is your first film is your best film because it took 35 years to make. Your second film is terrible because it took 2 years to make. After that, you kind of figured it out is a little bit better. And I feel like that's a little true for Mr. Soderbergh right here. This film is excellent, eminently still watchable.
Better than his second film.
And
it just makes such a statement. There's no way that you can watch this movie even today. What year was it made, Mike? Do you know?
1989, I believe.
89. So 1989, this movie was, dare I say, fucking shit up. Because people did not know what to make of this movie. Film critics, I haven't gone and looked at Roger Ebert's review of this movie, but I'm betting that that he was befuddled because he was a befuddleable person by this.
Sure. I tend to reread Ebert reviews for movies we do.
Did you read one for this?
I didn't, but they're rarely like helpful or informative. Like he's so agastable.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me that he is everyone's icon of what an American film critic is or was, because Pauline Kael just blows him out of the water, and even his co-host was better than he was. But that's beside the point. The point about this movie is that it involves 3 characters. It's a bit of a love triangle. I suppose it really involves 4 characters.
4 characters.
4 characters because there's a psychiatrist.
Okay. Let's name them because I'm one high alcohol beer and this little one.
See, I planned all of this with my Machiavellian strategy. I got Mike drunk on the first podcast that we recorded just a minute ago. So while Mike's trying to figure out how to put a noun and a verb together, I'll just tell you that this movie, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, involves the kind of characters that you probably don't want to spend too much time with because, they're really all bad people. James Spader.
This is a
James
strong
Spader
statement.
plays Graham Dalton, and Graham's a bit of a sexploitation pervert.
I would say by modern standards, he's a very average person with a very, in some sense, inspiring
he is
interest.
inspiring because he has as Johnny Thunders would say, he's got a one-track mind. And then we have...
But it's basically just listening to ladies talk about getting
hang on.
All right, I'll let you okay.
Yeah, which is why the ladies love him so much. And hey, if you really want to make friends with the ladies, this movie, if you take it on a literal tack, you can make a lot of headway whoever's out there listening and is so inclined. Annie McDowell plays Anne Bishop Mullaney, and she is married to Peter Gallagher's John Mullaney. Her sister is a real piece of work, played by Laura San Giacomo, and that is Cynthia. Her name is Cynthia in the movie. And then you have Annie McDowell's character's psychiatrist, and she's really sexually repressed, and she really wants to have sex with her shrink, but she gets to do that in a surrogate way with James Spader's character.
That's a strong statement. A strong statement. What?
Who comes back to hang out with his supposed best friend from college from 9 years ago, Peter Gallagher, who's now a very effective and thriving attorney is it North Carolina where it's set? It's somewhere in the South.
I'm not sure, but somewhere
in the South. But let's just say North Carolina. And so Graham Dalton, James Spader's character, of course, we love James Spader because he's such a polite pervert. And he returns to...
Crash is a very important
secretary
episode of this. Yeah,
and secretary.
Yeah.
And so
we're not fans of the Blacklist. I just want that to be clear.
I am. I love the Blacklist.
You watched the Blacklist?
Yeah, I've watched it. Yeah. James Spader, he can read the phone.
Do no wrong.
Yeah, he can read the phone book. He's fine. So anyway, he shows up and very quickly announces that all attention to him will be thought of below the belt, because as soon as he enters the home of his best friend from 9 years ago, Peter Gallagher's John Mullaney. John's not home yet, but Graham's going to stay until he can find an apartment. And so Gallagher's wife, played by Annie McDowell, and she invites him in. And the first thing is he needs to use the bathroom. But, it's a false alarm. It's a false alarm, whatever that means. He didn't really have to pee. He didn't really have to poop. But something below the waist that should have happened didn't happen.
Well, yeah,
and so
that's a sign of things to not come.
and that's his intro, and very shortly thereafter he is playing kind of a surrogate shrink to Anne, because he announces that he's impotent. And I say, what an ingenious way, what an ingenious come on. I'm impotent. Can we talk about sex now? Nah. And then he just lays out how he likes to interview women and have them talk about their sex lives and their imaginations, and if they act something out on because this is how the only way that he can get off supposedly is by watching these tapes later on. But I say, what a great scam. I say this guy's got it going on, because he clearly doesn't really care about his friend. He barely even says two words to his buddy. All he's concerned with is how many women he can get into this little web to talk dirty, and it works like a charm. Man, I wish I had this thing on a string when I was 18.
It's a bit of a dilemma, right, of who's more dangerous, the kind of traditional Peter Gallagher, he may cheat on you, maybe with someone very close to you.
Like your wife's sister? Hello?
Or a James Spader, who is very upfront with his perversion. Yet,
very upfront.
Yet is a pretty honest, very straightforward guy.
Evidently, this is a person whose life is just built around sexual innuendo and sexual story. Like, his whole life is sex, essentially. He is a sex person.
It's unclear what he does for a living.
Hello, sex person. Shall we talk about... I mean, come on. If you met some girl and she's like, oh, by the way, no man has ever made me come. Can we talk about sex? You'd be like, I find that I am unable to leave your presence, darling.
Right, your biography presented itself as a challenge.
I find you enticing already.
Yeah, Spader is,
and he's such a pretty boy, man. He's got the long like surfer
so
hair.
Hard
he's got the nice smile.
To explain to a person who might know him from something like The Blacklist, but he was the sex symbol of early 90s independent filmmaking.
Well, and with this movie, he became the sex he became the Sex Pistol
The
of
sex-
perversion. It felt good to say.
Yeah.
It's not what I wanted to say, but evidently it is. Yes, James Spader is the Sex Pistol of perversion. You heard it here on Grande Bouffe first. He really is. Well, you know, he
such
became
a mild perversion, right? And it is such a sex positive perversion. It's such a like just women talking about honestly about their first experiences. It's so non-threatening. I don't know. I have a hard time watching this from not so modern eyes, which is like, yeah, I mean, like it's annoying this guy can't keep it up, but like what's dangerous about him in a certain way? It's like if you're a man and your woman is being pulled away by a guy who just wants to listen to her, maybe you're doing something wrong, you know?
Well, here's what really you know set the tone for me is it's the first dinner. The Spader character comes to dinner for the first time, and there's his best buddy from college sitting right beside him, and the guy's wife sitting across from him, and he's just dissing on his pal, and he says, you know, the worst
aggressive.
Well, it tells us a lot about Spader's character, because his first point is that the worst kind of person is a liar, and the second worst kind of person is a lawyer. So we know he's a hypocrite out of the gate, because anybody, Armand White, I'm talking to you. Anybody who pretends like they don't lie in life is a hypocrite. Because guess what? I know better. There isn't a single person on this planet who doesn't lie every single day of their life. Period. So don't come to me with that honesty baloney, because you just marked yourself as a con man.
Hey, Cole, how you doing?
You what? Hello? Or do you lie? Can you say that you're a liar, Mike?
Ask me how I'm doing.
How are you doing, Mike?
Great.
See, there you go. All right. So.
That was my point. That was my point.
Yeah. So anyway, so we know that this guy is in it. He's a chiseler. He's an angler. He's working his angle, and sure enough, he's got a pretty good one. I gotta say, the whole sex tape thing. Because guess what? People, especially women, love to talk about.
It's
themselves
an
and
interesting
their sex life.
Thing to be so for with impotency, and it gives him
plausible deniability.
It gives him a status that's something like, I don't know if you watch.
He's like an angel.
I don't think you watch.
He's like a priest,
right? I don't think you watch Game of Thrones, but there's at this point like a good 3 or 4 characters who are eunuchs on the show, and it gives them a very interesting status and access to power and to control and to women that they would not normally be granted. And
do you know about Henry Jaglom?
Oh, that's so no. What? That's so familiar.
Henry Jaglom is a filmmaker.
Yeah,
and he was friends with Orson Welles, and he built his whole career on this whole way of working where he's very femme friendly, and he plays into feminine fantasies, but at the same time exploiting them. He's a martyr for feminist ideals in a way.
Okay,
and so it's like the classic. Me, as Shakespeare would say, methinks thou doth protest too much.
What are you saying?
Well, I mean, look at me. I went to the bathroom, but I couldn't go. Okay. Oh, look at me. I'm impotent. Are you thinking of my limp penis now?
Wait, make the connection of like Henry Jaglom.
So,
that's.
Well, he's one of these guys who has this very methodical way of. He likes women. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I mean, I like women too. But he really
his
his way of working, the way that he creates films, he's very improvisational, and he'll use his own life as the subject matter.
Yeah.
He famously used his divorce in one of his movies, and so he's somebody who's really into giving women their voice. And and that's obviously something, that's it. You're preaching to the choir. You got a rapt audience right there, and we're seeing that angle play out in this movie. And I think it's a very interesting love quadrangle, I guess, that goes on in this movie, because like I said, you got these people, none of them are likable characters. I think that Spader's is probably the most likable because he's really ingenious. He's figured some shit out, you know?
He certainly seems the least oblivious to what's going on. I'd say the second least oblivious is Giacomo's characters, who
Well, she is so intent. I don't mean, who we don't really ever find out what kind of axe she's grinding with her sister, but man, she's getting a lot of joy out of sleeping with her sister's husband, and she's the one who sets up the whole thing with insisting on sleeping with Gallagher at her sister's house. And I think that she leaves a little earring, I think, on purpose.
That's a bit of what's missing, I would say, in this film, is what's giving the fuel of this sibling, not just deception but betrayal here.
Yeah.
So like let's lay it out. What's the plot is so we have Peter Gallagher and Andy McDowell are a supposedly functional couple, but from the beginning we have Andy.
They've got a very nice house.
Very nice house. Andy McDowell is in therapy, and she's kind of talking about herself, blaming herself for any issues that they may have, right? But we also see that Gallagher's having an affair, and it's later revealed, not that, I'd say late Act 1-ish, right? So it's like a little bit of a twist, but not a terrible amount, but a little bit of a twist, is that she's having an affair, or he's having an affair with her own sister.
With his wife's sister.
And so when this old friend of the husband shows up, who's a little bit of a libertine, who has a certain thing he likes to talk to people about, and he's a bit of a just general social outsider. Is it because he's a coastal person? Is it because he's a deviant? It's not entirely clear, but he is outside of the norm, and people are just like bug-eyed and in awe to see this guy
operate. He's an operator. Yeah.
Yeah, and you come to his apartment, and he's got a lot of tapes out.
Really, pretty much all he has in his apartment is a camera on a tripod and a bunch of tapes with women's names on them. What are these?
It speaks both to the extremeness of his character and the cheapness of the set design. Because you got to remember, this is a very low budget.
It's so low budget.
But it's
very well concealed
masterpiece in realizing that there are no extras in this film whatsoever, that the budget is very low, that there are very few people actually in this film. You don't think about it for 1 second.
No. Soderbergh, he clearly was working out some personal issues that he had been mulling over for quite a while, because it's fully developed. The movie is so developed that you don't for a second question anything in it. It as a first film, it's really astonishing how, I put it on a par with Tarantino for Reservoir Dogs, or Scorsese. This is one of those first movies, when you see it, that this guy he's going to be a real filmmaker.
He's fleshing out some sort of relationship between the viewers and the camera, which a master level filmmaker is going to have a conflict with, where you have a affection for humans, for their psychological pain, and the ability to manipulate them and take a lot off of the honesty of having them on camera. And I think it's not a coincidence that the therapist is somewhat of a stand-in, I would say, for him, for Soderbergh, for this omnipresent, non-judgmental eye that is watching their life.
And also for Spader's character, because he is the guy that women can open up to. They don't feel threatened. There's nothing threatening at all, and so they get to have this very editorial way of expressing themselves about their sexuality, where they're not afraid of being judged, because this guy already can't get it hard. So they are free to tell the truth about their fantasies and their experiences. their sexual experiences.
I think that's right, and I think the eye of the camera, the eye of the therapist, and the eye of Spader are all these sort of like this spectrum of views, this these different angles that you can come in on, and being omniscient and watching people, and to different degrees you admit that you're kind of getting off on this. As a camera, you're a machine. As a therapist, you're like a say more, and as Spader, you're like literally the closest you can come to coming to people talking about their honesty.
It's a feminist piece that acknowledges the rivalries that happen between sisters and between women, and also the cutthroat nature of men, where Spader's character goes in. He barely says 2 words to his old pal. He's all about the guy's wife. He's not, I don't even think there's a scene in the movie. This is not, Cassavetes or John Sayles where, you're going to see the 2 guys chatting. They don't have a discussion. Gallagher's character is too busy messing around with his wife's sister, and Spader is just playing the long con on the wife. And what I think is funny about how the movie wraps up is, in a traditional story, Spader's character would have wound up with a sister.
You think so?
Yeah, that would be the right thing, because the sister's, she's the wild one.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But of course, it's the sexually repressed wife who's attracted to the impotent guy, and she finds her sexual power because she's able to ostensibly make the dead come to life.
Yeah, it does seem to be like an interesting subversion on the male gaze, and this sort of like, I kind of don't want to lean on the concept of like rape culture for this, but just the idea of just a male dominated sexual orientation and idea of what sex is about. A guy who's going to listen to your wife, who's going to talk to her and access her inner life, is the definition of a sexual competitor, right?
Oh yeah,
Not
for sure.
someone who's going to try to literally sleep with her, but someone who wants to know her reality and to get to know her and connect with her. That's the threat. And so that is what feels so subversive about it, is admitting that the idea that someone who wants to connect with your wife is the enemy, and making him your protagonist in a way is, I think, what's underlying the complexity of this film. In 1989, which is disturbingly not that long ago, is not okay with that. If this film came out right now, I think it would be interesting, but certainly not this seminal piece. I think we've come a long way.
Well,
but also,
I don't know.
I don't know if we have.
I disagree. I think it's just as, and I think it's interesting that it's just as relevant today as it was when it came out, because so much about technology has changed. But by the same token, anybody can imagine inviting a member of the opposite sex over and turning on a videotape and having a conversation about sex. And there's, that is just an idea that is really fascinating, and it's not gonna, that fascination, that level of interest isn't going to go away. It's a pretty damn good hook for a movie.
Yeah, it is. I honestly, thinking about it, I think if this movie came out this month, it could have a similar level of appeal and subversiveness. I think it's going to be a long time before our sexual mores shift enough that this is not subversive.
Well, Anne identifies Spader's character as a pervert, and so she's going to treat him a certain way. Her sister, who's happy to sleep with any guy, she sees it the complete opposite way. Oh, this guy's interesting. I want to go check this guy out. So it's about the women, and I think that's what's interesting about the movie is you see these different filters of female response between the sisters, where one sister feigns indignation, but in reality, she's really eroticized by the whole idea of this guy. And the other sister, she just wants to go in and rip it up, and she does. She goes in and meets him, and the camera's rolling 5 minutes later. So I think that. I really think that the brilliance of Soderbergh in this movie was that he knew how to get at the female identity and the female response, and I think it's a pretty realistic look at the state of feminism, or a state of feminism that probably some feminist women would not be comfortable with, because it shows the petty nature of their side of the track too.
That's interesting. Do you think that this film would be as compelling were it to come out now? Would it be as edgy?
It's a great cast. There's just no two ways around it. Annie McDowell is terrific. I still, I've seen this movie a couple times, and as much as I dig Spader's surfer boy, impotent sex pot character, Annie McDowell is the character that makes this movie tick. And
I think this movie gets her the best I've ever seen her in a film.
Oh yeah, she may as well have not ever done anything after this. And she didn't, she's not been a prolific actress.
I mean, she's been she's definitely a very recognizable actress. She's in Groundhog's Day, and she's a bit of a intellectual compared to Bill Murray's character, which I think she struggles to pull off with fully. I think this movie gets her. My friend Kenji, who we've had on the show, Kenji Mason, who's been on the show, talked about we've talked before about her role in this, and what he says, and I totally agree with. This movie gets her and how she can portray herself and the way that she processes things perfectly. I think Soderbergh absolutely knows who he's working with and uses.
Well, she's a type, and what I think is interesting about your comment about what would this movie be like if it was made today. It's a lot harder to find that type of woman. I don't even know if that type of woman exists anymore. She's very of a time.
Right, yes, which is the sort of reaction to a question that I was trying to think of, but I'm a little too drunk for it. What I was going to ask is...
Drink some more of the Victory Summer Love Ale, Mike.
I'm doing my best to
I'm drinking from the bottle now.
Yeah, okay. You are. What I was going to ask is, do perverts exist anymore?
Oh, yeah.
But isn't our line of perverts basically at illegal things at this point? I think the idea of a sexual pervert as being someone who has a particular fetish, which is consensual but abnormal. I mean, maybe in some places, but like in New York right now, it's like, what do you got to be into to be considered weird? I
don't know, but I just know that in America as a country, that this idea of a likable pervert. I mean, Soderbergh was really ahead of the curve to come out with this in '89, because he created this very likable, understandable, relatable pervert. The guy is clearly a pornographer. There's no two ways around it. And if you are a pornographer, there are probably a good 70% of the populace are going to deem you a pervert.
But Mike, he's a pornographer that even other pornographers, I feel like, would view as problematic, because he's not recording sex. He's recording
not anymore.
Sexual honesty.
But that's what porn has turned to now. The porn stars of however many years ago, before everything was free, they're all now doing these on-demand things where people write their own script for what they want to see the actors do.
Yeah, but that's not what. Well, let's be explicit with what James Spader is recording. Is he's recording people speaking honestly about their sexual experiences.
But he's getting these women aroused, and frequently they're masturbating in front of the camera for him.
Yeah.
And that's the story. And so then he goes back and he gets to masturbate with the while watching the videos.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
And I kind of want to be explicit. And he like can masturbate to it, right? It seems like he's impotent with other people.
He's impotent around anyone else, but when he's alone,
it's something like stuttering, right? Like people who stutter can often but seriously, people who stutter can often speak by themselves, but around other people have the inability to speak.
It's a mental block,
right? So that's the kind of place that he's at.
So anyway, Steven Soderbergh, obviously a very smart guy who miraculously pulled off this magic trick of creating this story, which at the time was pretty shocking. And I remember when this movie came out and everybody was talking about it. So it's not too often in American culture that somebody comes along and makes a movie about sexuality, which this movie is very much about mores and attitudes and sex. And how we process sex in our language and in our lives, and also how people manipulate other people through sex.
There's some lessons in this.
Oh yes.
To be a breakout indie darling who goes into some of the most box office success one can imagine. To go from this to what Ocean's 11. 12, 13 was 13, not as much, but some of the lessons, right, are to find a story which is just at the cutting edge of what people can deal with.
Well, he wrote the story. That's the thing. It's a very personal film, and you get that from watching it. You really feel like this is, there's no baloney. This guy is writing from the heart.
It's also it's the cutting edge of what 1989 could tolerate, to the point that people still talk about it in this sort of shock and reverence that lets it sustain itself to here. And you can also write a story and direct a film that's not as well made as this, and without as much creative potential and talent as Steven Soderbergh, who went on to be, like, here's the thing. You may not think you've seen very many Steven Soderbergh films, and that's probably inaccurate. You've probably seen a great many, but they have such a diversity in filmmaking style. And
yeah, I love his movie Bubble. I remember. Have you seen that one?
I don't even know what that film is, and that's fucking amazing to me.
Yeah,
because I have crawled his.
That's a great
his
movie.
IMDb. What is Bubble?
Bubble is. I don't know if he shot it on 16 millimeter. It's an incredible movie. I saw it at the New York Film Festival. I don't know, 10 years ago. But he obviously did the thing that all great directors know how to do, which is cast the right cast.
Yeah.
And
or hire a good casting director. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, same story, because Spader had a supporting role in Less Than Zero, which is a Bret Easton Ellis. We just covered Bret Easton Ellis, 87 movie, and then he had a supporting role in Wall Street. But this is Spader's big break movie. This is his breakout movie.
Yeah,
1989. All of a sudden, James Spader becomes this icon of cult sex perversion, and that led to him doing Crash, and Secretary.
Yeah, you can just see Cronenberg being like, "Let me co-opt this," and
also Bad Influence, which has Rob Lowe.
Oh my God, I love that movie.
We have to do that movie. I was living in my van in Salinas.
My friend Chris Johns, I'm going to give him credit right now. Chris Johns made me watch it, but what was your experience?
Well, I took a date in my van. We drove from Salinas. I was living in my van, and we drove 17 miles to Monterey to watch it at the cinema. And now my wife and I go to Monterey every year. I love Monterey, great little town, and And that was right when the Rob Lowe sex tape came out. At the
When that film came out?
Yeah. Right at the same time, like during the period when the
Perfect.
movie was out. And Rob Lowe famously made this sex tape in a hotel in Chicago during the Democratic convention, and it ruined him. It ruined his career. And if you look at Rob Lowe's credits on IMDb, you will see that there's about a decade where Homie was not working.
And you know when it came back is when people stopped giving a shit about stuff like that.
But other people's careers went down the tubes under the similar circumstances. Pee Wee Herman got caught in a pornos booth, and that ruined him for a decade.
He masturbated in a place where it's basically acceptable to masturbate, and
don't do that shit in Florida, man. Florida will mess you up. Yeah, no, I'm looking at Rob Lowe's. Although he did have an uncredited part in Tommy Boy in 1995.
I remember him in Tommy Boy.
That was 6 years later. Yeah. Anyway, so all right. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Le Grande Bouffe, the Big Feast. And if you're listening in Australia or in the UK or in Japan or China or wherever you're listening from, Dublin. We hope that you will go onto iTunes and
it's part of Ireland, right?
Yeah, and leave a review,
please.
And also check out colesmithy.com where you can see photos of our guests with us and our guests. And you can also go to Patreon and you can pledge your support of $5 or even $10 a month would be just awesome, because every little bit counts. And we've been doing this for 62 episodes, and we want to do it for 62 more. So please pledge your support through Patreon, because we love you and we know you love us. And please do yourselves and everyone around you a favor and turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie.